a place where your hosts, Wendy and April, discuss the creepy things that lurk in the misty shadows of the Appalachian Hills. I am, as always, the mysterious voice in the walls.
Hey everybody, I'm Wendy.
And I'm April. Our next tale comes from Frankfort, Kentucky, at a place called Liberty Hall. John Brown was one of Kentucky's first two senators, and he began building Liberty Hall in 1796. After its completion in 1801, he moved in with his wife, Margaretta Mason Brown, and their son, Mason. Not long after moving in, Margaretta gave birth to their second son, Orlando. She would go on to give birth to 3 other children, who did not survive very long after being born. She gave birth to 2 baby boys, both of whom were named Alfred, and both passed in the span of 2 years. In 1807, Margaretta gave birth to a baby girl, who was a delight to all those around her and shed a positive light on the darkened hall. That baby girl's name was Euphemia, but her life would tragically be cut short. On October 8, 1814, when she was just 7 years old, Euphemia passed away. Understandably, Margaretta fell into the depths of grief, and her writings were said to show her anguish and despair. She withdrew from her life and spent every waking moment wandering the grounds searching for a sign from her daughter, whom she believed was now an angel. Her brother came in from New York for a visit, and he was shocked at the sight of her. She was emaciated and seemed to have aged many years. Her mental health was in utter disarray. The family was worried they were going to lose her as well. 3 years passed, and her emotional state improved very little. In 1817, Margaretta's aunt, Mrs. Varick, traveled down from New York to help her. She raised Margaretta after her mother had died at a young age, so the two had a close bond. At this time, Mrs. Varick was 72, and the journey to Kentucky was rather difficult. It also took place during one of the hottest summers in July. She was unable to recover from her journey from New York, and on the 3rd night with the family fell violently ill. She died that night in an upstairs bedroom from unknown causes, though many suspect it was a heart attack. Mrs. Varick is said to have been laid to rest on the property among other family members. The grave markers that are there today show no record of Mrs. Varick, and the cemetery has no record of her burial. One thing that is certain, there are many reports of her being spotted on the grounds, and she has earned the nickname, the Gray Lady. One of the first sightings took place in the late 1820s. A young bride was staying in the bedroom where Mrs. Varick passed, and she reported seeing a gray figure walking across the floor of the room and then disappearing. In the late 1880s, John Brown's great-granddaughter, Mary Mason Scott, also known as Mamie, was staying in the home. She was awakened by a rustling sound and saw a tall apparition, veiled in gray, leaning toward her. She reached out toward the figure, but her hand passed through it and it disappeared. She screamed, and family members ran into the bedroom armed with a fireplace poker and a shotgun, expecting to see a human intruder. Mamie said similar experiences took place the next 2 nights. She was so unsettled she asked to be moved to a new room. Mamie inherited the house as an adult, and some said that she gave palm readings and held seances in the house. She decided upon her passing the house would become a museum due to its rich history. The house was sold to the National Society of the Colonel Dames in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Mamie was a member of this society, and they remain the caretakers of the property to this day. As for more recent sightings, a college professor conducted an experiment to see if the moon could be causing a reflection in the window. He spent 6 weeks in the house analyzing a full cycle of the moon, and all his findings were negative. On his final night, he was awakened by a friendly touch and found a friendly Mrs. Varick smiling at him. Another thing that happened was while the hall was undergoing restoration, the curator was taking pictures to document the work being done. In one picture, the faint image of a woman coming down the staircase can be seen. No one living was on the staircase at that time.
All right, so let's break this one down. It's no secret there's a lot of tragedy that took place in this house. Right after they moved in, we had 2 young baby sons who passed away. I'm not sure what the causes were. And then also the daughter. The daughter was, 7, 8 years old when she passed away. And again, we're not sure what the causes were of that. But that's enough to take a toll on a young mother. And I guess she kind of lost it after that. and was kind of deteriorating herself.
Well, I think that makes sense. We're talking about the early 1800s here. Infant mortality was a big thing. And I think that it's interesting that it talks about that she named the baby boys the same name.
Right.
The one was born and didn't live very long and passed. And the second one that was born, she just gave the same name. And I think that was kind of a common thing during the time period because, we didn't have the best medical knowledge back then. They didn't have the best access to medical care, and infant mortality was kind of high, and even maternal mortality was kind of high. So I think that's kind of interesting, and I know that she probably felt very heartbroken, to lose all of these children, and so that's going to give a big cloud of grief hanging over her.
Yeah, so as she was going through this grief, she had her aunt. Well, her brother came to see her first and saw how upset she was and that she was wasting away. And I guess he gave her a set amount of time. And if she didn't get better, then he was going to send the aunt down to take care of her. And the aunt she had a bond with because, the aunt raised her after her mom passed on. And, kind of took her in as her own. But the aunt was 72 years old, and we're talking early 1800s. This isn't just jumping on a plane and going to Kentucky from New York.
Yeah, there would have been a long journey involved there. I mean,
we're talking coaches. We're talking, I think she had to ride on horseback. I mean, this poor lady had to go through quite a treacherous journey to get to her niece.
Well, and one thing I thought was interesting, and we talked about how the mother had passed away, and so the aunt had pretty much raised her, Margaretta, and I thought it was really interesting because Mrs. Varick, the aunt, her first name was Margaret, and so it makes me even wonder if she was named after this aunt.
Oh, yeah.
And, that just even further the closer the bond that they had. But, yeah, traveling all of that distance at 72 years old, we're talking... That's up in age in the early 1800s.
Yeah.
I don't know that there were a lot of people that lived to that age back then. And so that was a hard trip for her. And, she just wasn't able to overcome that, which brought even more grief into the household.
Yeah, we're already dealing with tragedy. And then she's there for just 3 nights and passes on that 3rd night in the house. And, she's there to help out. And she passes away, and she doesn't get to help out like she expected to.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, I thought it was interesting that there's no record of her burial. There's no gravestone for her. There's no record in the cemetery of her burial. And I thought that was kind of an interesting, unusual thing.
I like that you bring that up because the family was buried on the property there at Liberty Hall. Mm-hmm. But then everyone was moved, from what I understand. They were moved to a Frankfort cemetery. Mm-hmm. And so everyone was moved, but then still there's no record of her. There's no marker of her. I'm not sure where she is. I'm not sure. And a lot of people say that she's wandering the land and she's wandering the property because she's trying to get justice, or she's trying to get, because there is no marker for her. Huh. It's like she's she has no closure. She has no...
She is not at rest.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's interesting, but she doesn't strike me as a vengeful ghost in any way. She strikes me as like she wanted to help. And,
absolutely.
All of these sightings that talk about her... It seems that she's a friendly ghost, amiable. It talks about how, I thought it was really funny, the college professor that was trying to, disprove this theory, and he spends like 6 whole weeks documenting the moon, and then on his final night, she's like, haha, gotcha, not the moon after all.
Or after 6 weeks, he wanted something to show for it, so it was like at the end of the 6 weeks, he was like, yeah, the last night, I got nudged by this person.
That's a good point, too.
And I do think it's interesting that, she is described as a helpful ghost. Often people will say that she cleans and she does things that are helpful. And that's what her intention was on Earth. Her intention was to go and help out her niece. And then she's known as being a helpful, friendly, benevolent ghost. So
like, if she wants to come hang out at my house and do some cleaning for me, I would be totally okay with that.
Send her your way. Yeah. But here's another thing. So... one of the first sightings was a young bride, and she was in the bedroom where, Mrs. Varick passed, and she said that she saw her, and, as an apparition walking across the floor, and then she disappeared. Now, here's my question. I'm sure she knew the story of her passing in that bedroom. And my question is, if you know the story, is that going to make you see things? Is that going to kind of creep you out and make you think things?
Well, that's possible too. And, it doesn't mention her husband.
No.
It says she's a young bride, so I'm
Right.
assuming she's a newlywed. So husband's probably there too. Did he not
Did he
see anything going on?
Was he asleep? Was he snoring and couldn't be bothered? I don't know. But, I had a similar experience when I had a friend I used to stay all night with all the time. And in the bedroom that we slept in, stay there all the time, no problems, everything fine. One night she lets it slip that someone died in that room.
Oh, great.
Yeah. From that night forward, I started seeing things. Things that they were figments of my imagination. But now that I knew someone
Power
died in
of
that
suggestion.
room. Exactly. Now that I knew someone died in that room, it's like, what was that noise? That noise was no longer the refrigerator kicking on. That was now an apparition floating through the room.
Was it right before you went to bed? So it's like, hey, good night. Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
tight.
As a matter of fact, it was. We're just laying there and we're talking, and she's like, oh, someone died in this room. I'm like, excuse me?
Why am I just now hearing this?
Could we not have established that when we first became friends and started sleeping in this room? No, this is not okay. So, and I feel like maybe the story itself could have played on people's imaginations, or maybe it could have.
Well, I think that's true. I think anytime that there's a story of a haunting, whether it's a friendly, positive haunting or like a scary, creepy one, people hear that, they go in expecting to see things.
Right.
Oh, I've heard all these stories. I'm going to see something too. And I think that kind of plays into it a lot. I thought it was really interesting about the great-granddaughter, Mary Mason Scott, who was referred to as Mamie, when she comes in and stays. And I think it was interesting that she asked to be moved to a different room. She was
Yes.
staying in that room. Presumably, she had to have known the history.
Yes.
And then when she starts seeing this figure, nothing, ominous about it, but when she sees this figure kind of leaning over her, that in itself is enough to creep you out.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think I'd want to stay in a room after having an experience like that.
Something that was interesting was, one thing that bothered her so much that she asked to be moved. So, it happened more than once. Another, in my research, I found that she looked very similar to Margareta.
Oh.
She looked very similar to her. So the fact that the apparition is leaning over her, like in a caring way, maybe she thought that was her niece.
Maybe she's drawn to her and,
Yes.
wants to help out or take care of her since she didn't get the opportunity to actually take care of her niece.
Exactly. And then
Interesting theory.
just the visual of her relatives running into the room with the fire poker and the gun.
And the shotgun.
I'm
Shotgun and a fire
sorry.
poker. Yes.
That's enough to dispatch anybody in the early 1800s.
Tell me you're from Kentucky without telling me you're from Kentucky.
Hey, you got to be prepared. You always got to be prepared. You never know.
So that I chuckled when I read that part because, the relatives coming in expecting to see a real intruder and then finding out there was an apparition. I really I enjoyed that part of my research. That was fun.
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't tell us how old she was at that time, how old that the great-granddaughter was, but it does say that when she was older as an adult. So I'm assuming she was probably, teenager, younger kid when all of that was going on, because when she inherits it as an adult, she seems to embrace that.
Yes.
If she's having these palm readings and having seances and things like that, it seems like she's embracing that spooky, creepy aspect.
Okay, Mamie, if your house wasn't already haunted and you're having palm readings and seances,
That's
Mamie,
a good way to get your house haunted.
you're bringing something in there. Don't do
You're poking
it.
the bear.
Don't do the palm readings and the seances unless you want to bring something in.
Yeah,
Let's not
you're
do
going to
that.
attract the wrong kind of attention.
Let's just leave it be. Don't do it. But yeah, okay, so here's some good news. You can go and you can tour Liberty Hall. It is closed for season right now, but it opens back up March 1st. So we can go, and I know what we're doing.
I know what we're doing over spring break.
Road
April,
trip.
Voice and Wall. We're going first Saturday in March. You can go and you can tour. You get your tickets, $9 for adults, smaller price for kids. We go and you can tour the bedroom.
Oh,
You-
wow.
Yes. You can go in, you can tour the grounds. There were 2 houses for the boys that survived, Mason and Orlando. I know Orlando Brown's house is still there on the property. And it said his house was built in a certain way because he liked to throw parties. So it's like a party house. Mm-hmm. But you can tour the grounds, you can tour the house, and yeah, you can go in the bedroom where all of this took place and visit. So
that would definitely be an interesting trip to make. Well, speaking of, the whole picture on the staircase while it's being renovated, and we actually have that. So we'll put that up on our Instagram so that you guys can check it out. But I think it's really interesting because it's kind of a hazy thing, but that is definitely a feminine shape. Reminds me of the dresses that they would have worn back then. So it's definitely interesting, I think, to think about.
Yeah, as the resident debunker, I kind of think maybe I see imagination at play. I see, someone died in the room, so you kind of get that in your mind as you're going to sleep, and you start thinking that you see things, and it kind of plays with you. The picture on the steps is hard to describe. I mean, it's hard to explain. So,
well, and we have to think too about when the picture was taken, because it doesn't really say, it just said it was during renovations. So we have to think about the technology of photography at the time and how it was taken. Is that one of those long exposure kind of deals? Is it on regular film where you might have a double exposure? So there's lots to consider.
Or light leaks.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So before I can say anything for sure about this, I'm going to have to, get some more information on that. But yeah.
But I always like seeing stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you show somebody that picture without saying, oh, here's what you're supposed to be seeing, and then, what do you think you see here? I think it's always interesting to look at different people's interpretations of stuff.
But I do love the fact that we can go tour this place. Our audience can go tour this place and look at it and get a feel for it. And now, knowing the story behind it, that makes the tour that much more exciting.
I imagine that all the proceeds of that probably go right back into that historical society, since it has been turned into a museum. I wasn't familiar with this National Society of the Colonel Dames in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I had not heard of that before. I may want to look into that and see.
Well, I'm curious to ask, too, the workers, the tour guides, if they've experienced anything.
Well, yeah, because you would imagine if they're there pretty frequently, that if there's weird things going on, they're probably going to be privy to that.
So we may have to do an update on this one and after we talk to the tour guides and see if they've experienced anything.
Right. Of course, too, it might be, yeah, we saw something. You want to come visit us more often. Maybe you'll see something too, So there's always that possibility. You got to kind of keep it going to keep interest up.
Right.
You're just here a week late. If you come back next month, I'm sure there'll be.
But it is a really nice story, and it was a fun story to look into.
I am always happy to hear the friendly, helpful ghost stories as opposed to the gonna kill you in your sleep kind of stuff. Yeah, I'll take a benevolent spirit any day over an ominous one.
Absolutely. We would love to know what you think about this story, and if you've visited Liberty Hall and have any experiences you would like to talk about, please let us know on our social media sites.
You can contact us via Facebook at Haunted Hollers. We are also on Instagram at Haunted Hollers, and you can even find us on Twitter at Haunted Hollers. We do have a website, www.hauntedhollers.com, and you can email us at hauntedhollers@gmail.com.
Until next time, listeners, beware of things lurking in the shadows.